Okay, it's recording. Hey everybody. So I knew I should update the blog because I hadn't updated in a while, but I didn't really feel like typing for a long time, much as I love relating my adventures in New York. Um, it's like midnight and I wanted to go to sleep kind of soon because I'm gonna have a big day out shopping tomorrow. But I definitely did want to update, so I'm gonna try another one of these vlog things. I'm recording with the built-in webcam on my Mac, so we'll see how it goes. I keep seeing myself moving on the screen, and it's kind of weirding me out. But anyway, I actually wrote down what I wanted to talk about. So professional, and I have to lean forward because I took off my glasses because the screen reflects off the lenses. You can like see my screen and it's weird. Alright, so I need to update everybody on my activities of, what I'm doing day to day because I've, talked a lot about what York is like and the freakish abundance of birds around here. There's actually a flock of gray geese that have taken up residence on the lawns and sidewalks in my court, where all the houses, all the flats in my court are. And they did this randomly one day so that I walked outside to go to class at 9 o'clock in the morning, and there's geese just everywhere. And their poo is everywhere, all over the sidewalk, which is just like at home at UMBC, because as everybody who goes to or has gone to UMBC knows, who's watching this, once the geese move in, there is poo everywhere around the library and the library pond, and you just have to watch out for it, so. Yeah, but they're pretty funny. They just kind of sit there and eat or sleep, and they're fine if you're walking by them. They'll come within, 6 inches of you if you're walking by them, but as soon as you stop or, seem to be looking at them, they'll stop and look at you. And if you keep getting closer, they'll start going, which is a weird sound. But, if you get too close, they'll screech at you. So then it's best to, walk away, because they can be pretty nasty when they want to be, but mostly we just leave them alone and they leave us alone, except for their poo, when, life goes on. So yes, daily activities. On Mondays, I volunteer for a couple of hours at the York Minster Library, which is a totally awesome, amazingly cool place, and I absolutely love it. I'm sorry, I'm yawning. It's late. Yeah, I absolutely love it. It is so awesome. It is located across a small park from the University of York, from the York Minster, and it is the main part of the building is built off of a chapel that was built in the mid 1300s, and then just sort of fell into disuse and ruin. And the York Minster Library actually used to be in a part of the York Minster building, I believe, where the gift shop is now. But eventually it got too big for its rooms, so they redid the chapel that was across the park and put the books in there, and then they built a building off of that that was eventually knocked down, I think in the 30s, and then they built a bigger building attached to that. So there's the old part and the new part, and the new part is just new and, well, not really new anymore, but it's normal 20th century architecture, whatever. But the old part is awesome because it's giant, stones and stained glass windows and old creaky wood, and oh, it's so awesome. And I am actually working in the old book section. They have they put in a floor in the chapel, so it's 2 floors, and the bottom floor is just normal books that you can borrow, with bookshelves that go 10 feet tall. It's crazy, but there's all kind of books in there, usually on historical or liturgical subjects, or archaeology or history of art, things like that. And University of York students can get books out of there with their University of York card, so I've been pulling books out of there. I actually have to pick one up tomorrow, because I have to read about the land of cocaine for one of my classes. But that's all well and good, but a floor above is where the really cool things are. I mean, they have an archive, which I have not yet seen, but apparently I can get a tour of if I just kind of talk to the archivist, which is pretty cool. but they have an archive with text going back, like their earliest text is I think a Northumbrian text from the 11th century, which is so totally awesome. But obviously they're not letting me work with those. I'm a lowly undergraduate and that's not working. Sorry, I'm leaning back against my bed. My back started hurting. But no, I am working in the old books collection, which has books going back to the earliest stages of book printing in England. When I decided I wanted to volunteer there, Antonio, who was in charge of the volunteering, was like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'll show you around and I'll show you some stuff. And he just kind of walked into where these old books are, which the really old books are in the cage, which you kind of like go through this, like, it's like a wire door, it's like thick wire, it's like what you see on Law and Order, the like judges' rooms or whatever, they always have like the books behind the wire, like walls, doors. It's like that, only it's like an actual door, and like they open it with like a long old key, and you go in there and there's just like these tall shelves, and then this really small winding staircase that goes up to the balcony where most of the books are. But he just kind of walks in and grabs this book, or grabs a box rather, unties the box, opens it, or unties the ribbon around the box, opens it, and there's this book in there. And he's like, yeah, this is like a 1481 copy of Cicero. Opens it, plunks it down into my hands, and I'm just holding this thing like, this is the coolest thing I've ever touched. Oh my god. And I'm just, you know, dying. It's so awesome. So he puts that back and then takes me up the spiral staircases onto the balcony, and he says, yeah, we've been working on this project. There's this guy named Andrew, he's a retired bookseller, and he's been working on this project where he's just going through each and every one of these books, which is over 3,000 books in this collection alone. And he says, you know, he's been going through each of these books and looking for old bits of manuscript, because when they first started printing books in Britain and in pretty much everywhere else in Europe, they, you know, it was a society that didn't waste anything. So they decided that the best, most efficient way to bind these books, because there was a great demand for printed books at that era, was to cut up old manuscripts that nobody else was using and use them as binding. Which to me, I just think of that as like one of the most horrible things you can do. It's like akin to, I don't know, something terrible. And but to them it was just normal. And what's even worse than that is in the 19th century antiquarians and booksellers and bookbinders thought that they should, you know, rebind these books, because a lot of them, the binding was falling off and cracking and whatever. But whereas today, if we were rebinding a book that old, we would pick it apart very carefully and just kind of note whatever it was and try to maintain, you know, keep everything. In the 19th century, they weren't concerned with that. They only wanted the pretty bits, so they just sort of ripped off the binding and any of the dust jackets and any of the fly leaves, just ripped it all off and rebound it, which gave the book stronger binding, but also lost everything of the original binding, which is terrible, because a lot of these bindings you can find, you know, like two or three pages of manuscripts in the best cases. So Antonio pulled out a book that still had its original binding and had 2 pages of Latin music from like the 1300s, old manuscript, just there. And they found some pretty crazy stuff going through these books. They found a book that had the signature of William Wordsworth in it, which is insane, and apparently that's been put in some sort of safer library. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So I am helping Andrew with that, and Andrew's a very nice older gentleman who just kind of lets me go around and look at any of the books I want to look at, which is cool. The first week that I actually got down to work and started doing it, which was